would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. I am so happy you've decided to join me today. I particularly want to thank those folks, and I realize, the way of the podcast, right? It's all about consistent delivery, and part of my plan was to consistently deliver on a regular schedule, and I realize I haven't lived up to that for a while. And this house move has absolutely, or the preparing for the house move, in fact, we're not even to the house move yet, has absolutely been playing havoc with it. So I apologize to all of you out there for not being able to be as reliably regular as usual. Hopefully that will change. I've created a mobile recording setup that I carry with me in the car now so that I don't have to just do it from my office at home. If I'm out doing something and I have time between things, I can, and I have yet to figure out how stupid I'm going to look doing that with people walking by my car with me talking into a microphone. It'll be fun. We'll see how it goes. So that's I'm trying, folks. Hopefully it'll all work out. Kind of interesting data today. I'm planning to put on my schedule some effort to research to see if this is true in my local area, at least reflected by the data that we're seeing in the stories we're going to discuss today. Because it's really interesting, because if it is the indication of a trend, it could actually back up something I said early last year. I got a little flack last year for saying that, and this is back then, right? And what the big complaint then was all the brand new construction is million plus, at least in my area, right? Whatever the equivalent of luxury housing is in your areas or high-end housing, that's what it was at, right? So in my area, that usually equates to about well, of course, my area extends from where 1.2 is the million is the average, all the way up to areas where 600,000 is the average. But in any event, the luxury market, right? So the stuff that tends to be out of reach of your usual folks, and that tended to be the vast majority of what was getting built. It's still a bit of an issue here, but as I've talked about on recent shows, I'm seeing trends that show construction going on that's going to cater to folks at the entry level. I'm debating whether or not to talk to you about a new project being started in downtown Morgan Hill that is the very first time I have ever been enticed to consider buying a condo where I would live. So anyway, stay tuned for that. We'll see if I end up remaining as excited about it as I was initially. But in any event, we've talked more recently about trends towards more affordability. And a statement I made, I'm sorry, I almost got distracted by the shiny thing. The point I was making a year ago when all of these very expensive homes were being built was, the expensive homes of today are potentially the affordable homes of tomorrow. And I kind of made that as a passing thing, and I'm not sure I ever circled back around to explain what I meant by that. In my book, all construction is good construction in terms of building more homes. And now some of it is going to solve problems in a much longer term. So it's not really going to help in the short term because, yes, homes that are being built right now that are aimed at the luxury market aren't going to help typical folks. But down the road, those will join the ranks of being, pre-owned homes that will go into the marketplace that will get sold. And in a lot of cases, those homes end up becoming the equivalent of more affordable homes later on in the marketplace, right? So in the long view, all of that construction is good, but I get that it doesn't solve a more right in front of your face problem. But also keep in mind stories I've been able to tell you about brand new home developments here in Morgan Hill where when the downturn occurred, suddenly homes that were at brand new homes, never lived in homes, everything brand spanking new, that were unfortunate in terms of their timing, but languished on the market for several years, going unsold and ultimately selling for close to half of what they were originally supposed to sell for. And the last time we discussed this, and if you've been a listener at least for a couple of weeks, you'll know that one of the things that is potentially drawing builders to more affordable housing is the turnaround, in that they don't have to wait longer for that sucker to get sold. They're going to have tons of takers at lower price points, so it leaves them less potentially at risk to fluctuations in the marketplace that they can't anticipate, right? That may happen in relatively quick periods of time. Okay. So with all of that sort of in the back of our heads, try to remember that. If not, if you haven't listened to those shows, go back and catch up. No excuse. Plenty of shows in the back queue for you to listen to catch up with the subject. Some very interesting stories. There's a ton of them. I mean, you could Google this if you like. I'm going to share two because they kind of hit the main numbers. One is from I think this one's from the Los Angeles Times. Yes, Los Angeles Times. And the other one is from Housing Wire. Probably the Housing Wire one is the better one to jump to. It's got a little bit more complete information than the Los Angeles Times one. But some very interesting numbers. And I wanted to review them with you. All right. So the Commerce Department released Tuesday the new home sales, which dropped 11.4% in April. Now, when you hear a number like that, right? Because we've talked about how there's so much demand, and there is. But this demand seems a little bit smarter. When it gets to a certain price point, it's as if the folks in there out there demanding homes are like, nope, no thanks. I'm not going to spend at that price point. So when you hear a percentage like this, there are other numbers you should want to know. One would be, are there more or less new homes available? Is the reason why we're seeing fewer homes selling is because there are simply fewer new homes, right? That'll be question number one when you're trying to analyze this stuff. And one of these articles completely ignores that, doesn't bother to tell you if there's been an increase in the number, in the inventory of new homes. One does. The other question I would ask is, where did the highest level of activity occur for these new homes? Now, we can take a guess on the trend, at least based on the average purchase price for new homes. But remember that sort of muxes all of the sales prices across the entire country. And another thing we try to repeat here on the show is your local market matters, right? The micro market matters. So you should try to suss out if this is the same phenomenon happening in your local marketplace, and if so, to what degree? Because remember, again, this is an average of all markets. But what's interesting is that all markets are showing the same trend. And that's another piece of data that is important to understand what might be going on. Okay. So data point number one, 11.4% drop. That is huge. That's gigantic. You get into double-digit drops in things over the course of a month, that's crazy. And whenever I see a drop that big in anything, I want to know why, right? If you see a subtle graduation from month to month in various things, you can say, well, that might just be a change in attitudes or maybe even minor changes in the number of people out there participating in the marketplace. So maybe you'd look for commensurate increases or decreases in the number of folks applying for mortgages, those kinds of things, right? Or getting pre-approved for mortgages. But what's also interesting is that from the same time last year, we only have an increase of 0.5%, right? So a relatively flat increase in terms of the number of new home sales compared to a year ago. And when you're doing your seasonal stuff, trying to eliminate for seasonal influences, it's always great to go to the same time in the previous year. Okay, now, according to this article, economists had expected a more modest retreat from March. Now, March had the highest since October of 2007. So, I mean, we had this peak. So it was natural that we might see a decline from that. But this was huge. This was a gigantic decrease. Now, sales fell in every region of the country. Interestingly enough, led by a 26.3% drop in my part of the country, in the West. That's the biggest drop since 2010. Now, economists are sort of viewing the April reading as a one-month blip. Chief economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics, Ian Shepherdson, called last month's drop a correction from the March cycle high, not a warning sign. Given the size of the drop, it's absolutely something I sure would keep in my mirror as something to worry about. According to him, he expects sales, and I'm quoting now, "We expect sales to rebound somewhat in May and to return to the March high, at least over the next few months." They make a few claims here. One of them is that with the healthy job market is expected to give Americans confidence to buy homes. The only problem with that is the kind of jobs we're getting are not "I can buy a house with what I make" style jobs. So I think there are still challenges there that a lot of folks just don't seem to want to get. And I have a hard time believing that folks that process these numbers don't get that the jobs that are being added don't tend to be the type that help you buy a home. Now, that's gotten better. If we compare it to a year ago when all we were hiring was service folks and bartenders and that kind of thing, and a lot of them not even full time, we're better now, but it's only a little bit better, right? So not enough for me to hang my hat on everything's going to really ramp up in the coming months. What's also interesting with this is that not only did the volume of sales drop, but the sales price, the median sales price of a new home, slid 3% to $309,200. Now, and this could be influenced by a variety of things, right? It doesn't necessarily mean prices have slid to that point. It could mean, now this is the median, right? Which means that at this point, half of the homes that are for sale are above that and half of the homes that are for sale are below that. That's not the average. While the average and the median are usually, somewhere close to each other, that's not always the case. I would guess, given, and I hate to guess, but let's theorize a little bit. If you had to guess, in general, do you believe that homes are huddling towards the higher end right now or the lower end? Where would you guess? Now, in terms of price. Now, in 6 months, we may have to say something different about that, right? Because we talked about the other day the fact that we're seeing more affordable housing being built. The condo that I'm kind of excited about in Morgan Hill is reasonably priced. We're talking $500,000, and that's a little pricey for a condo. I mean, a lot of people are paying that kind of money for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family residential homes in some areas. We can talk about why I'm enticed by that maybe in another show, and why I'm getting more and more swayed to the potential of having a condo as an investment. We can talk about that because whenever I challenge something I've put out before, boy do I, and for folks for the longtime listeners, boy do I get smacked in the head with the emails where, hey, you've been telling me for over 10 years now that I shouldn't be looking at condos as an investment. And the fact of the matter is one of my investment property in Hawaii is a condo. So, there are exceptions to every general rule, I guess, but we can talk about that. That's another show thing. Anyway, sorry. Didn't mean to get off the point here. Okay. So that's the majority of the information you get from Los Angeles Times Home. Now, sales of new single family homes, according to Housing Wire, in April came in at a decrease of 11.4. So same data. Home sales are still lagging behind population growth. So one other piece of data here is, despite increased population growth, we're not seeing this increase, which would normally reflect an increase. Another really interesting piece of data here is that housing inventories actually increased. Now, they don't mention how much, but we saw inventories increase, volume of sales decrease, prices decrease from $315,100 from last month to this month, $309,200. And what's also interesting is this is the time of year when you expect those numbers to not go that direction. You expect the market to get more active. We're heading towards the end of school. This is when stuff's supposed to start getting going, right? So how do we wrap our head around this? What is actually happening? What's happening? What's the truth behind these numbers? Now, we're going to talk about that in a second, but first we're going to take a quick break, so don't go away.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about some, bottom line is, kind of interesting brain food data relating to new home sales. I didn't call this. I would not have called this. When we talked about these numbers last month, in terms of what needs to be out there, what I was putting out was we just need more inventory, bottom line. And I believe that is still true at the right price point. I believe we've done an awful lot of construction at the wrong price point. But I would love to see the days on market on this kind of stuff. How long are these brand new homes staying on the market? What are the price points? Now, before we went to the break, I kind of teased this idea of let's figure out what's the motivator behind this. What's pushing this? Average sales price was down $309,200. And my argument would be, well, one argument you could make is, well, the developers are now just putting more lower priced homes out there, so the median price is going down. That one doesn't make a lot of sense to me. My feeling is there are still plenty of developments out there that are at the quote-unquote luxury end of the spectrum. My guess is also that if you were to look at the average sales price, and not the median sales price, but the average would be higher. Because it would reflect the fact that there's homes out there that are priced a lot higher, right? That aren't selling as much as the others, but they're out there affecting the average in terms of price. What I think we're experiencing here is more a reflection of what buyers are doing. I think that what we're going to see is buyers unwilling to go up to these higher numbers. And I think this might be a reflection of this. This might be a softening in the amount buyers are willing to pay. Now, of course, it could be that some of these homes represent the projects that are less expensive coming online. I think it's too early for that, though. We were talking about this phenomenon, the building homes at a more inexpensive level, and the logic behind why developers would do that. We were just talking about that within the last week. The numbers that we've been looking at that would reflect that this is happening through construction and permits and the things that are happening. That stuff's all very, very recent. So these places can't be built already. So it kind of leads you to believe that we're still dealing with new home inventory that was built in the late part of last year. Probably construction started, maybe mid to late summer. Construction wrapped up. Homes started selling in the first quarter of this year, and we're seeing escrows aren't typically that long on brand new home sales. So these are folks that got into contract, like March, and then it closed the following month at the latest. So all the stuff that would be on the marketplace doesn't really fit in with the timing of what we've seen. So I think that the trend, the change, is more reflective of the attitude of buyers rather than anything that the builders have done. Unless we're seeing builders dropping their prices on inventory. And I'm just not sure that's happening. Now, if any of you are seeing that happening in your local marketplaces, I'd love to hear about it. Now, remember, again, this isn't something we can point to a single market and say, yeah, this is happening here, here, and here. It's happening everywhere and happening the most in my area. And I would really like to get more data on that because, as you know, one of the things I do is track new construction and when things come online for folks to buy. That's how I found out about the condos that are going to get built in Morgan Hill. So I get new house alerts once a week. I go and I check them. I put them. I kind of tabulate what the averages are in terms of total number of homes offered for sale and their prices and all these other wonderful things, and then try to calculate where those prices sit in terms of the averages for the market overall. Does it represent a deal compared to pre-owned homes or not? You know, those kinds of things. And we've definitely seen movement towards more affordable stuff here, but I haven't really seen that in the areas north of me. So I'm interested to see where this huge 20-something% is in the West. So I'm probably over the next couple of days going to crunch some numbers relating to Silicon Valley, which is primarily Santa Clara County, and see what's going on there. It's a little bit tougher to track numbers with new homes. New homes don't get entered into the MLS system when they sell. Unless they're being marketed by a real estate firm. And that's happening less and less now, which tends to communicate robustness. If a builder is not partnering with a real estate office, they're using their own internal real estate folks, that usually indicates that it's more of a market where they can call the shots, where they're not having trouble selling things. They usually don't want to get out and start having to give a bigger piece of the pie to external real estate companies until they're having trouble getting it sold themselves. At least that's been my experience. I don't know if I was only involved really with one real estate firm that really courted those kinds of relationships, and that was sort of my take on it when the office I was with was getting those kinds of deals in Morgan Hill. It wasn't something that usually was how they started. If they didn't sell everything during that whole model home phase when that stuff is all going on, they would get their people out of there and hand it over to a local firm. So the big question here is where does this indicate we're going? Is it a 1 month thing? Is it just a weird blip on the radar? Or is this the indication of a trend? Now, I think either way, it's something we want to look at to determine what kind of trend it is. Is it a trend relating to buyers' feelings and the fact they're not willing to go up to these higher prices? Is it just simply a deciding we're simply not going to pay more than this amount? Or is it a change in what's going on with developers? Have home builders already managed to start bringing homes to the marketplace that are lower priced, that are a little bit more competitively priced than in the past? Now, for those of you who are more plugged into this stuff in your local areas, I'd absolutely love to hear more from you about what you're seeing. Are you, on average, seeing lower prices for new homes? I can give you some feedback based on what I'm seeing in Santa Clara County and Morgan Hill and San Martin and Gilroy and South San Jose and other areas in and around there. But I can't tell you about Phoenix or Wichita, Kansas or Miami. And I'd love to hear from you folks what you're seeing in those marketplaces. As you know, I've also been kind of keeping an eye on Sacramento as a potential investment. And I think it's time to realize that I need to learn to take my own advice. We now have two situations where if I had taken my own advice, I would have done exceptionally well on my investments. For those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that about 3 years ago, we talked about investing in Round Rock, which is just north of Austin. We had looked at a lot of things. There were some projections relating to that marketplace talking about it was going to be a standout market for the year following when we were talking about it. I believe it was 2000. I think we were talking about it being a standout community in 2015. So we were talking about it, I think, in November of 2014. I even talked at the time about doing a trip out to Round Rock and potentially finding a property. That never ended up happening. But sure enough, 1 year later, when we did a review of markets that just did an amazing level of performance for investors, Where was Round Rock? Right up there towards the top of the list. It was, I don't know how long ago. It was over a year ago now. It was probably, was it January of last year? Maybe even December of the year before. So December of 2015, January of 2016, where we talked about Sacramento. And I thought it was going to be a great opportunity for folks. Sure enough, things are really rocking in Sacramento. And if I had jumped onto the bandwagon at the time, I'd be doing great. So there you go. The dumbest thing I ever did was not take my own advice. So I thought I had a little data to share with you about Sacramento. Where the heck did that go? Sacramento housing in April. Let's see. Sales are down 3%, but active inventory is down 16%. Prices are doing very well. Rents are doing exceptionally well. It's one of those areas where cash buyers are making up 15.6% of sales. And it's been generally declining, but it has also been more stable, I think, in a lot of compared to a lot of different areas. So I actually think that that I wish that I had taken my own advice. I think that would have been awesome. But in any event, let's see. Was there anything else about Sacramento? No. Okay. All right. So I think I tell you, it's starting to feel like we may be at a pivot point. I know I've mentioned pivot points in the past. I remember discussing my opinion relating to us being at a pivot point earlier this year, and we didn't really get the pivot that I was expecting. I was expecting something a little bit more dramatic to happen. It doesn't mean that won't still happen. My timing could be off on my estimation, but I think given all the data we've talked about, particularly since the beginning of this year, we're setting an interesting stage for what may happen. And this could be the beginning of that. And if the trend continues, I think it could spell a very interesting time in terms of affordability and accessibility to new home construction. And if new home construction starts to go down a little bit, you can bet that existing home sales are going to be affected by that. Simply because it's a marketplace. It's all one marketplace, and new homes are in that marketplace. And if we're starting to see that happen with new homes, the next homes that usually get hit by that kind of stuff are your pre-owned homes. So, all right, folks, I hope that's been some interesting information for you, some good stuff to chew on. As always, the ultimate goal is to give you more value in terms of what we discussed than the time you spend listening. I hope we've lived up to that today. Thanks again for listening, everybody, and I'll talk to you all next time.